Oh my god, Nikolai, is that you? How long have they had you? What's going on? Have you seen any of the others? Are you okay?
I have drafted a design for a flying machine.
I have drafted a design for a flying machine.
I have drafted a design for a flying machine.
I have drafted a project for a flying machine. Eu elaborei projeto para máquina voadora.
Nikolai, it's Anderson. I drafted a project for a flying machine.
We had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning now. As we have an apparent serious oxygen leak.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we've had a problem. He's in a roll and he can't stop it. Performing an evasive maneuver. Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. I think we need to do a little more all-weather testing. Welcome to space.
Hello, listener, and welcome to Failure to Launch, the space history podcast where we take you through every mistake, failure, and explosion that made modern space exploration possible. We are your hosts, Quinn, he, him.
Chris, he, him.
Kelly, he, him.
And a caffeinated Chris, he, him.
And today we're finishing up our dive into the life of Nikolai Kibalchich, the rocket pioneer, socialist revolutionary, and edgelord who blew up a czar.
That's Nikolai on Yevor.
Now, returning again is friend of the show Kelly, host of the Canuck Is A Slur podcast, where he's recently covered another weirdo bomber, William King Thomas. Kelly, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me back. After how disastrously the first recording went and how mean I was to Chris, I'm a little amazed you had me back, but it's good to be here.
I know, yeah, we were kind of locked into it.
Just, obligated to...
Yeah, the fans actually turned out really liked the more abusive, bit more conflict going on in the recording. So
that means that we have to crank the abuse up. There needs to be more abuse.
Well, the problem is, I did listen to the episode. It was great, and I was really impressed with how I think you got a 2-hour recording down to a 90-minute final version.
It was like 2.5, I think.
Yeah, which is no small feat. But you
really
edited
cutting the fat.
You edited all the mentions of Chris's piss jug out, so to rectify that, I'm going to have to slip the mention of a piss jug in as many times as I can during this recording.
That was
the concept of iced tea does not exist on this plane of
Me walking by a bar, seeing everyone drinking that golden flu, like, what the fuck's happening in there?
What kind of kink shit is this?
I'm sorry, guest. I'm sorry, Kelly. You know, we want more of the insults. Some of them are going to have to be going back your way.
I'm here for it. I show up to every podcast recording ready to brawl. Like, that's why this is why I've been dressing up as like a series of pro wrestlers with all my recordings now.
I was going to say, I do like the pit vipers.
The mood. Yeah.
For context here, if it's cool with you, Kelly, I'll just like take a snip or like take a screenshot and then put that up for people. But
patrons only.
You are dressed like a Soviet synthwave wrestler.
Oh, that's so good. That's such a good thing to think about.
But no, for patrons only.
Yeah. Yeah, see, the thing is, this video is available. If Quinn wasn't greedy, like, you would all be watching this on video the whole time.
Yeah.
But he chooses to withhold that from you because he's a mean old man.
They'll get the content. They'll get it one way or another.
And you'll notice that everyone else here is too scared to face me. There are no other cameras on right now.
My camera isn't working. This podcast operates as voices in each other's ears. That's how we're comfortable.
I'm actually just an LLM.
That explains so much.
Yeah, just nonsense. Nothing but nonsense.
Deliberately making an LLM and then just like mic quality. Downgrade that shit.
Oh, just everything. Just every single slider reduced.
Now, we were told that we were going to riff at the end and get to business now, so I'll get us on track. Now, in the last episode, we covered Nikolai Ivanovich.
You don't get to read my script. Stop reading my script.
You shouldn't have given me your script.
No, that's for you reading quotes.
You gave him the keys.
I have no choice now.
This is why I only give the guest the quotes, because like if you put a firework in front of me, I'm gonna light it.
And I'll just read whatever's on the script. You can edit stuff down later on, and I'll just read that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a machine.
Local Kyrgyz correspondent hijacks
the teleprompter
podcast.
is on in front of my eyes, and I'm being yelled at for reading it.
Now, like Kelly was saying, in the last episode, we covered Nikolai Ivanovich Kibalchich's life through his childhood, his education, and how he became the chief bomb maker for 𝚑𝚠𝚎𝚎 Volya. I'll get it right one day. Or People's Will, a socialist revolutionary group intent on overthrowing the government of Tsar Alexander II, Emperor of Russia. If you have not already, I highly recommend you go back and listen to that episode first. It will give you a lot of very important context. But just as some cliff notes to get people back up to speed, Nikolai, he always had throughout his entire life a very strong tendency to stand up to what he saw as injustice. This is something that he carried forward from being a child, where he would attempt to beat up bullies, or to when he assaulted a police officer who was beating a peasant. This is something consistent about him. He also had a long-standing habit of turning whatever apartment he lived in into a library for banned literature, or explosives later on. This wound up catching him in St. Petersburg. He was jailed pending trial, but then for various reasons he spent 2 years waiting, and in the end he was sentenced to a singular month in prison for his crimes.
Just gotta love the bureaucracy of just 2 years of absolutely nothing, and then
just
fuck off to jail for a month.
My file pinging around the bureaucracy of the Russian Empire circa late 1870s.
Just being so low priority, you get a longer sentence just by virtue of being worthless.
I was gonna go for saying that he was actually just sitting in a fake prison with invisible walls the entire 30 months. But that's more of a mime thing than a clown thing, and that's not quite right.
They put him in the mime prison.
Well, that's exactly right. How do you negate a clown? Mimery.
Yeah.
They're ancient enemies. Space Station 13 has taught me this. You know, if you put a clown in a clown prison, then they're just gonna the bars are just gonna be rubber. They're just gonna they're just gonna get out. You know.
You just can't get away from them.
Oh man, stealing the keys from the warden on the comically large hook, and then you're constantly pulling them away from his hand like a Turkish ice cream vendor.
Almost got it.
Sprinting away as the snipers fire little darts, lawn darts at you, just the squeaking of your shoes as you make for the river.
Returning fire with the precision flower on your lapel that shoots water into the sniper's eyes. Helps you make good your escape.
Yeah, me getting out of my cell with a comically sized, the key to the city that the mayor gives you, that the warden just has 100 of them on his belt. You know, I would play this game. If the escapists I'm picturing, what if the escapists had a kid with killer clowns from outer space?
I'm just imagining
Escape from Tarkov clown mod.
Oh.
Oh boy.
Dude, Clown Stalker 2 would rule.
Yeah, just put the really squeaky shoes on the bloodsucker so you just get the extra little paranoia of just hearing...
Oh.
I can't even joke about being a clown stalker due to previous legal incidents, so I'm gonna sit this one out.
Now, yeah, that's why you're wearing high vis.
Yeah.
Now, understandably, getting trapped in prison for 2 to 3 years for basically a misdemeanor radicalized our guy. He was already a socialist. He was already a propagandist by this point, distributing pamphlets and literature and whatnot. This made him a self-proclaimed terrorist. And as soon as he got out of prison, he joined up with the People's Will, 𝚑𝚠𝚎𝚎 Volya, and he became their chief bomb maker.
Man, being in jail for 30 months while you're not even expected to be there that long, can you imagine how full your piss jug would get?
Oh, well, it would also suck because, you put in the form that says, hey, can the guard please clean out my piss jug? But that got lost in the bureaucracy several months ago.
Oh, that's the first form that gets lost in 19th century Russian prisons.
The piss jug emptying.
The piss jug emptying form that you had to fill out in triplicate.
Well, you see, joke's on him. It was made of glass and he just exploded it on the bars.
You're in jail in Kyiv. Yeah, it's got to be sent to St. Petersburg. It somehow winds up at the Tsar's desk for some reason. It's just winding its way around. And then at the end, several months later, it comes back with a red rejected stamp on it.
Yeah, people don't realize this, but a lot of those autocratic leaders of old were such micromanagers that they were actually going line by line for which prisoners and which prisons would get their piss jugs emptied when.
Yeah, that's actually why he decided to take part in bombing the Tsar.
Meanwhile, the socialists are just all right, now what if we just got a massive jar for everyone? You know, we can all we need to pool our resources.
The jar at the center of Moscow.
There's just a giant jar. Every house's sewers is just plugged into the jar that is buried several miles down.
I was imagining a scenario in which people did not have household plumbing, so they'd have to walk to the town square to piss in the giant piss jug. So it would really suck to be like those people that have to walk like 45 minutes to go piss.
Waking up at like 2 a.m. just having
the socialist revolutionaries have an answer for that. Public transit, you know?
Yeah, it'll take you to
trains,
the piss.
Cable car, like, you know.
See, we know how two of us are podcasting immersively. I have the old-timey military uniform, and Chris has the piss jug, but I don't know about the other two of
you. Get a brain bleed from this.
All of this coming back to an offhand joke about Arizona iced tea.
Listen, we've already firmly established this is his motive for killing the Tsar. Moving forward,
yes. We'll get to something later where I don't entirely think you're wrong. It's by the end of this, you are going to realize that Nikolai's life is the 8th Team Fortress 2 comic. It even lines up with like the period somewhat. Everything here was written by the Team Fortress 2 writers.
They just went back in time.
Did you say the 8th Team Fortress 2 comic?
Yeah, because they just
gotta be the most like specific reference I've ever heard.
It was big enough like 2 weeks ago, I want to say. Like they waited, I want to say like 7 years or something between putting out the last comic and the one they just put out recently.
Yeah, that tracks.
Say, isn't this like a 15-year-old game? Like,
yeah, but you know, people love it.
It's a good game.
Now, that is most of the story, and Nikolai's bombs were used in numerous attempts on the Tsar. But where we last left them, the people's will was being whittled down. Most of its leadership was dead or jailed, and if they were going to make a difference, they'd need to do it soon. So they launched a multifaceted set of plans to finally kill the Tsar.
I'm imagining he's walking in a purple suit, he's like the Joker in The Dark Knight, and there's all these like 19th century Russian mafia guys, and he's like, our plan is simple. We kill the Tsar, and then they all go apeshit.
Also, like with the last episode, my main source for this series is the book Nikolai Ivanovich Kibalchich, Terrorist Rocket Pioneer by Lee B. Croft. As always, links will be down below in the show notes.
Blowing up the Tsar.
So they set up a cheese shop.
Cheese. God, this is my favorite part of every story.
And it's not exactly the best shell company, but it got them roadside access to a street. Like the Tsar always took the same routes. He didn't really mix them up. And this gave them an excuse to just, hey, there's a new cheese shop opening up. Awesome. And it just happens to be on the street with the Tsar's armored carriage traveling down it regularly.
I love this idea that Alexander is basically just like an 8-year-old. It's like, can't resist the new cheese shop. He is going to beg, like, please, can we see the new cheese shop?
Just going to be pressed up against the window of this carriage like a child.
Like his nose again. Yeah.
It's my birthday.
All the revolutionaries are trying to build bombs, but they can't because the Tsar is actively spending too much time in their shop.
You gotta, this is like terrorism 101. You have to build the bomb before you open the cheese shop.
Like one of them's just like, can we just like stab him next time he's here? Guys, no, we're bombers. We're not stabbers. There was actually a kind of fun story where like, I didn't get to it last time, but in their attempts to kill the Tsar, at one point the People's Will had a guy, it was whenever they were planning to bomb the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. And what they did was they got a guy inside who was able to carve out the space where they put the bomb underneath the dining hall. But in the process of working there, at one point he wound up like he was just a tradesman. He was just like a construction worker. He wound up in the same room with the Tsar, who was reading a book and had his back turned on him while he was just like fixing a fixture. And whenever he gets back and describes this, everyone's just like, yeah, I know we had like a bomb plan, but like, why the fuck didn't you stab him right there? And he responded like, well, he's an old man and he had his back turned.
That's not honorable.
That's not, it'd be unfair.
This is such a lame thing to admit that I have this movie occupy brain space at all, but I'm imagining like a Tsarist Russia version of Scott Evil, who's just like, he's right here in the cheese shop. Just like, you don't need a big plan. Just take a gun and shoot him. I'll do it right now. Like,
no, we're gonna let him go, and we're gonna hope that the plan works out. It's like,
if I was much less embarrassing, I would make a literary reference. Like, you know, it's just sort of a version of Just Lather, that's all. But it's like a guy cutting cheese with a big knife, and he's like, just cheese, that's all.
And we also talked about last time how Nikolai kind of invented IEDs. And he was going to perfect this here. He built 2 advanced, like, shaped charge IEDs effectively. These were designed, they would be put underneath the road, and these were designed to put all of the blast in 2 cones immediately upward. Basically, as soon as it was set off, this would destroy the road immediately in front of the cheese shop, hopefully destroying Alexander's carriage whenever it came through.
Damn.
Yeah, this was a cool plan. They also had a backup plan. Like I said, like they set up till now, they've been kind of like, oh, he's in a train outside on the way to Moscow. We'll blow him up there. They fully set up shop. They get a bunch of safe houses in St. Petersburg, and they have a lot of plans. They have a lot of plates spinning to kill him. The other main plan...
Next thing you're going to tell me is the dude is just going to come up with explosively formed penetrators back in the day.
I mean, so the backup plan was a little less elegant. It was just to have 4 dudes with grenades.
Oh, okay.
And they would just, if the Tsar either survived, like if he went down the main road and the bombs failed to kill him, he would just get rushed by 4 guys with grenades.
Or just stab him.
I mean, yeah, that was actually something that was considered.
There's got to be a perfect Goldilocks zone. You talk about like exactly how compact the blast would be. But when you get it going off in front of the cheese shop, like if it's just enough explosion, you get the cheese melted to like a delicious kind of consistency. But too much, and you're fondue, like you're covering your target and, you know, all the bystanders in like scalding cheese. So it's a very delicate science.
That's the backup. You drown him in the cheese.
Yeah, it just the road just opens up beneath him and his entire carriage just falls into a lake of fondue.
That would be such a humiliating legacy if it was like, well, you're walking through a museum like, yeah, after the second he survived the initial bomb blast, but he was killed by the burns from the cheese.
It's like Lenin lying in state, except it's just like it's a tub full of cheese.
Just a cheese cube.
He's in there somewhere. It's fully solidified. Now, speaking of the cheese shop, to maintain the cover story, they actually had to make and sell cheese. This was an operational cheese shop.
The Tsar encased in a slab of cheese, like Han Solo in the carbonite slab.
He's actually just preserved perfectly in there. You got to melt him out slowly.
I know we got to get back on track, but you know, like how the Russian mafia is known for like packing snow into your mouth to suffocate you, and then it just like melts.
Yeah,
like the 19th century Russian clown mafia would just pack your mouth with cheese all the way, and then I guess the rats come and eat it out after you die.
You just wake up by the side of the river, and you just have like huge pieces of cheese on either foot, and then they just shove you in. But yeah, they had to actually make and sell their own cheese, which means they had to learn how to make and sell cheese. And as this is going on, they have like 2 people who with fake identities, and their job is to run the cheese shop. And as that's going on, they have a mining crew underneath who's like digging out the road in order to set up these bombs. And any of the sounds or smells from the mining, they just passed off as being part of the cheese making process. This worked. And it even worked on a secret police general who was tipped off. Like, they get a tip about, hey, there's something suspicious going on at this cheese shop. It sounds like mining. And he goes to inspect it. Quote, in the barrels was stinking mud taken from the tunnel, but Yuri told him that it was condensation from bad cheese. Yakimova then directed General Mrovinsky's attention to a stray cat they had taken in as a pet. The cat came over and rubbed against Mrovinsky's leg. This distraction worked, and then the general left them alone.
This is like some 80s sitcom fucking kind of level of distraction.
It is. Yes.
For fucking real.
Also, just the fact that like he's looking at mud. This is very clearly dirt that has been like poured into a barrel, and
with
they're just
rocks
like,
in it.
Oh, that's bad cheese. Mate. I'm sorry.
This is just steamed ham shit. It's like, Skinner, why do I hear mining in that cheese shop? And he's like, oh, it's condensation from the bad cheese, superintendent.
Can I see it? Look, a cat.
Yeah.
Look at this cat.
The cat's a member of the people's will.
I want to know how you become a general in the fucking Tsarist Okrana while being able to be like this. Like, they didn't bribe him or anything. He was just like, yo, what the fuck, that cat?
Clearly the son of a nobility.
How hard did this dude get killed after the Tsar died?
Oh, probably a fair amount. Now, on March 1st, 1881, everything seemed set. The mines were in place, the grenade throwers were trained and ready. That morning, the Tsar was going about his normal routine and preparing for his weekly trip out to see his lifeguards drill review. So this is basically just like, he's got they're called the lifeguards. They are his bodyguards. They are his home guard, and they're doing a big drill thing, and he's going to go out and look at it. Now, he'd missed the last 2 weeks because of concerns about the terrorists. So he was determined this time to make it work. Like, everyone's telling him, like, hey, there's terrorists, there's bombs going off all over the place. You should not go to this. And he's like, no, I want to.
He also has to pass a cheese shop. He needs to go in and get some.
Well, hold that thought. Because the only security consideration he would allow is that the Princess Katya, his daughter, convinced him, like, hey, please don't go that way. Please go somewhere else. Basically, he agreed that his carriage would take a different route coming back. It would go along the 𝚍𝚟𝚎𝚑𝚒𝚗𝚎 instead.
That, if anything, is probably going to make it more dangerous, because now his guards can't spot the bomb throwers coming up from their tall chairs, which would have been planted along the edge of the old route.
You're just going down. You're on your way back from the drill review, and you notice that there's 2 clowns at one end of the street and 2 clowns at the other. And they're just kind of standing there. They don't seem too suspicious.
God, I'd be so embarrassed if I was running up to the Tsar's cage. Or I would be so
embarrassed
if I was running up to
the huge shoes. Yeah.
Oh, see, no, I'm going on the lifeguards thing, because I would be so embarrassed if I had to run up to the Tsar's carriage and then I get like the whistle blown at me and his guard would be like, hey, no running. And I'm like, oh, sorry.
Yeah, the Tsar, it turns out, is just deathly afraid of water. Just surrounds himself with the dudes from Bondi Beach. Now, the Tsar left his palace as planned, went to the review, and spent a few hours visiting his cousin at her castle. All this time, the revolutionaries waited for him to return. When he finally started to head back to the palace, they noticed he was taking a different route and scrambled the bomb throwers to new positions. Meanwhile, the mines under the road were disassembled and hidden as quickly as possible.
It's also hard to catch, terrorists attacking the Tsar when every time the lifeguards run out to try and, stop one of them, they always have to run in slow motion.
It's just like, if you join the Tsarist army, if you're hot, you become a lifeguard, and if you're normal looking, you get sent to the Okhrana.
Not the most effective,
no.
Imperial Guard, as we'll see, but boy, are they the sexiest.
So it kind of speaks to their planning ability that after all that preparation, the plotters were now scrambling to figure out where the Tsar was going and trying to get grenades there fast enough. It was a rush job and far from the clean assassination that Nikolai was hoping for. At 2:17 p.m., a pair of grenadiers were set up at either end of the 𝚍𝚟𝚎𝚒𝚗𝚎 Canal, with their spotter, 𝚍𝚕𝚢𝚒𝚗𝚎, on the opposite bank. So basically, she would give them the signal to strike, and that signal would be she would raise up a white handkerchief and kind of wave it a bit. But when the carriage passed and she gave the signal, the first bombers hesitated and ran.
What
a bitch!
The next bombers, he waited too long, he threw his grenade too late. It wound up right beneath the armored carriage. The blast pushed it up into the air, and the horses just bolt at this point. The carriage is still intact, the Tsar is still alive, and the horses sprint 100 meters down the street. Yeah, so the first bomber, he is immediately tackled and captured. The Tsar was fine, although the grenade did kill one of his guards, and it also killed a 2-year-old child who was nearby.
Not a great start for the reducing collateral damage aspect of the plan.
Yeah, in fairness, this was the side that Nikolai didn't like. He was just making grenades. His preferred plan was the hyper-concentrated IED.
Yeah, to send him to space.
And we kind of talked about this before the recording, but I love how in coup attempts or assassinations or stuff like that, what often happens is one side or another will just act completely inexplicably, and that is the key to success or failure. Because after surviving that first attack, for unknown reasons, the Tsar got out of his carriage, walked back to the blast site unprotected, and started asking questions of the first bomber, the guy who was tackled to the ground. He just comes up and he's asking why would you do that? While he was looking over the scene, his brother, the Grand Duke, arrived and asked if he was okay, to which the Tsar responded, "I am whole, thank God." Then, quote, Rysakov, the first bomber, seeing the approach of Ignaty Grinovitsky with another grenade, interjected, "Don't thank God yet." Grinovitsky, who had been lurking by the canal parapet, thrust himself through the gathering of people and threw his grenade directly at the Tsar's feet from a distance of only 2 meters.
Okay, that's some action movie shit. Just throwing that line out there.
I need to believe he got that in, and that's not any kind of historical trump up.
No, he actually got the one-liner.
So just an actual serious technical question here. So the like the IED like shape charge thing you were describing that's like a clockwork mechanism setting off dynamite, right?
It would be set off electronically.
Okay, yeah. And
they'd have like the detonator in the cheese shop, although the guy pulling the trigger very likely knew he was going to die.
Right.
Because no matter how concentrated it is, there's going to be some spillover.
Meanwhile, these are just grenades.
Right, so the grenade of this time, does it also have like a mechanism setting it off, or are they basically just lighting like a physical fuse and like throwing it?
I believe they're lighting physical fuses with these ones. I don't think they're like clockwork or like spring-loaded or anything like that.
It's very funny to me that this is a real-world thing, because like as somebody who has played an unhealthy amount of the Red Dead Redemption games, I remember playing and being like, well, obviously this is stupid video game logic. Like, nobody would actually be lighting a fuse on a stick of dynamite and just throwing it like a grenade. Like, that's just an invention for video games. But like, no, I mean, it sounds like that's basically what they're doing.
Not to mention, they were trained to throw, like, Nikolai was very clear. They even tested, like, these guys, they went far outside of town and they did tests with the grenades in order to, like, test them, make sure the guys knew how to use them.
Is there any indication on whether any of them just fucked themselves up at the grenade range?
I don't know about that. I don't know if Ignatiy Grinovitsky just, like, missed that day, because they were told to stay 10 meters away from the target at, minimum.
He needed to be sure.
Grinovitsky, meanwhile, he runs up and he drops it at his own
just
feet.
Low rolls it.
He's just kind of like...
I mean, this sounds a bit like the everyone has a plan till they get punched in the face thing, where like everyone's 10 meters back, and then you've already seen the Tsar like survive
you gotta make
one
sure.
of your explosions. Now you're just calling audibles and you're like, fuck it, like spring break, I'm just gonna get in there and just tear shit up.
So this is close enough that it destroys the Tsar's legs, and it also just like rips Ignatiy pretty much in half. Both of these guys, this grenade lands on the ground right between them, like a meter away from them, and their lower halves are just ripped to shreds.
Also got to mention, you kind of hinted at it a little bit earlier. Early grenades are hideously unreliable too.
Oh yeah.
Like between fucking up the fuse and you have something that just pops in your hand before it gets anywhere near someone.
So yeah, Alexander II, Emperor of Russia, was rushed back to the Winter Palace, where he died of his injuries pretty much within minutes. And his even more dictatorial son, Alexander III, immediately took over as Tsar.
No, I was saying earlier that, like, oh man, I would love to live in the 19th century when you can just kind of like faff about and drop out of school and do something else and move towns. But also, like, if I get blown up by a bomb, I want to be rushed to a hospital. So the idea of getting rushed to a palace is like not that intriguing to me.
Yeah.
No, bring me to a modern trauma center. Everything else has to be like, 1800s clown shoes.
You have been ripped in half from the bottom down, and all your attendants are just like, get him back to his bed, get him to his bedroom.
A good night's sleep it'll fix you.
This is like, oh my god, what is the fucking name of the clown in the meme where he's like, but doctor, why can't I remember this?
Pagliacci.
I am the great Pagliacci.
So pretend I remembered that. But they're doing a literal version of Pagliacci, or not a literal version, but instead of a mental health, it's just a doctor saying like he basically the Tsar is saying like, oh, I've had my legs blown off, I feel terrible, and then the doctor saying solution is simple, great clown Pagliacci's in town, like he'll heal your exploded legs.
But the great clown Pagliacci is the guy who killed me.
Yeah. But doctor, the assassin was Pagliacci.
You're just forcing your way into the center to throw the grenade at the Tsar, and you're just honking on a little.
The last thing he hears is the
and then explosion.
Immediate detonation.
You got to imagine the absolute worst possible timeline for Kibalchich as somebody who is explicitly trying to reduce like friendly fire and mass casualties and collateral damage would be to actually successfully bomb the Tsar's carriage, but like before the Tsar gets pulled out, like 35 other dudes get pulled out first.
Yeah, it's armored on the outside, and on the inside, all of the lifeguards are just hugging the Tsar at all times to like just fill up they're his roll cage effectively.
Yeah.
No, it should have just opened the door, stuffed the grenade in, and hold it shut.
Because of animation and gibbing restraints, the only parts that can get blown off are the legs. So you're going to have a cart full of torsos and legs.
Yeah, the Tsar gets blown up, but he blows up in like perfect Half-Life gibs where there's just like his torso, his head, and like all of his arms and legs perfectly intact. Although, as it turns out, he did lose a toe.
Oh, not a toe.
No!
I guess it's something of a mitigating factor here in terms of like, yeah, it sucks to die in a palace instead of a hospital, but like, at least you get surrounded by your guard. You die surrounded by your guards who all look like David Hasselhoff and Carmen Electra. So
they probably hit him with so much opium.
Just being cradled by an incredibly ripped, shirtless guard.
That would suck though, because those guys, like, you know, if I'm dying, I want to be lying down on something soft, not abs that feel like bricks.
Just abs you can shred cheese on.
Well, you're still laying on a bed. You're just being cradled by the strong arms. You get the best of both worlds that
way. That's fair. That's fair.
If you're laying on someone's abs as you're dying, that does sound bad.
The Flying Machine.
On March 2nd, the day after the bombing, flyers started to appear around St. Petersburg addressed to the workers of Russia. Quote, "Today, March 1st, Alexander the Tyrant has been killed by us, socialists. He was killed because he did not care for his people. He burdened them with taxes. He deprived the peasant of his land. He handed over the workers to plunderers and exploiters. He did not give the people freedom. He did not heed the people's tears. He cared only for the rich. He himself lived in luxury. His police mistreated the people and he rewarded them instead of punishing them. He hanged or exiled any who stood out on behalf of the people or on behalf of justice. That is why he was killed. A czar should be a good shepherd, ready to devote his life to his sheep. Alexander II was a ravening wolf, and a terrible death overtook him."
These are the world's most cuck socialists because they're like, well, obviously, like, power to the people and like the workers should, I guess, own the means of, you know, peasantry or whatever. But it's still like, well, we're still sheep, obviously. Like,
yeah, like in this,
we need
in this
to be
whole
shepherded.
Thing, they are not
guys.
against. They are not saying that there should not be a czar. They're saying that Alexander II was a bad czar, and that's why they killed him. It's like, we need a better czar to lead all of the people. They also sent a letter to the newly crowned Tsar Alexander III, though this one was much less radical. They were like, hey, I'm sorry we killed your dad. He gave us no choice.
Your dad was an asshole.
And they also gave him they didn't even make demands of him. They just gave him a helpful list of like, this is our recommendations for reforms in the Russian Empire.
I'm going to tick this one into the like pro 19th century column because it kind of rules that after you literally kill a head of state, you don't have to worry, well, at least they chose not to worry about like being traced back. Like you can just write a letter from you as the like incriminated party that, yeah, like, hey, yep, we definitely killed him. Like we take credit. And then, I mean, I guess as we're going to see, they don't get away with it, but.
Oh, no.
But also the fact that you can write a manifesto and like the most powerful person in the empire will read it.
I mean, what else are they doing at this point in time? Fuck all.
For what it's worth, on his like first day in office, Tsar Alexander III is ramping up the Okhrana. And he also, I don't really have much of it here, but one of the first things he does is he sets up a civilian tattling network where every single home would have to have one person nominated as the anti-terrorist rep. You know, your son is now in charge of tattling on everyone in the building about their anti-czarist activities. Also, a somewhat weird story. As Alexander II was lying in state, he was missing a toe. It had been blasted off by Grinovitsky's bomb, but a cop returned it. He'd been one of the first on the scene on March 1st and had apparently found it in all the chaos and just decided to keep it, because he only gave it back like 2 weeks later.
He wanted some time with the toe.
And that toe now preserved in a jar in a bar in the Yukon.
Well, here's the thing. He brought it back in a jar of alcohol, which I'm just thinking like that is the best mezcal I have.
That shit'll give you superpowers.
Like, Zarto Mezcal, Ruscal, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean, the toe shots. You know about the Yukon toe shots, right?
I don't know about the Yukon toe shots.
Oh, it was like a bar in the Yukon. I think it was like a prospector's toe from the Klondike Gold Rush or something, but they like kept a toe in a jar and you could like pay to drink the alcohol from the jar or some shit like that.
Ooh.
But they had to get like a new toe when somebody accidentally swallowed the toe. Which I think has possibly happened more than once.
Oh, the Yukon Mafia, dragging me outside and cutting off my toe.
Yeah, I guess I just assumed that everyone knew about that. Like it's one of those things
I did not know about that
on social media and shit. All right, well there you go. Everyone learned something today.
Yeah.
You accidentally drink the toe and then they come out, they take you out back and chop your toe off, you know. You take, you give, you know.
Yeah. That's actually the induction into the Okhrana here, where
you gotta do the toe
if you
shot.
want to be in the secret police, you have to take a toe shot.
Oh, I was about to say, it's like the Assassin's Creed thing when they cut your finger off.
Yeah.
Think of
it allows you to fire the Okrana shoe gun.
In order to be a part of the people's will, they have to cut one of your toes off.
We have the toe trumpet. Now we have the toe shot.
Oh, no.
What's up next?
Oh, yeah.
What more toe stuff are we doing?
Toe theme podcast. I've been pushing for it the whole time. Let me get my toes on camera here.
Ooh. But this cop actually hadn't planned on bringing it back. Like, whenever they ask him, like, hey, you were there. It's been 2 weeks. Why didn't you bring this back? Quote, he had contemplated saving the toe as a souvenir, perhaps a valuable one for him, but then reconsidered, telling the palace guards to whom he gave it, I didn't want the Tsar to go to his grave lacking his toe. Which, nice thought.
So, I mean, and I hate to derail all our great bits with another sincere question, but so, like, the way you described it was, like, his legs were obliterated, and, like, I always have a hard time picturing what the actual physical damage of this kind of an explosion is. So, like...
Nothing was severed. It's just kind of like bones and shrapnel. Like, imagine taking multiple shotgun blasts from, like, the waist down, like the guts and the waist down, effectively.
You're just tattered.
Yeah, his entire body is Swiss cheesed.
Him and the bomber, like, they've had their legs pulverized, but the only, like, part that flew off a body was that one toe.
That one toe. I mean, I'm sure there's, like, bits and scraps of stuff, but it
was noted as being a toe.
An appendage, yeah.
Okay. Did they say which toe?
His little toe on his right foot.
Okay.
So, like, arguably the least necessary to have if I'm going to my grave, but it's still a nice thought.
I'm trying to imagine, like, my brain is having a hard time wrapping its head around, like, there's a powerful enough force to sever the tiniest toe, but not, like, obliterate the severed toe beyond recognition. Like, it was still a thing he could
it was able to separate and fly off.
I think it's just kind of the random luck of the shrapnel, because, like, it's effectively just firing a spray of little metal pellets everywhere. And some of them just go into meat, some of them go into bone. This one happened to, like, cleanly cut off his toe.
I guess that's my brain is also poisoned from learning about the bombing that takes place in the story that we covered, where, like, he used so much dynamite that actually was like, people would be like, oh, all I can find of my loved one is their hands. Like,
right.
Goes to show what a difference the amount of dynamite makes.
Oh, yeah. As for the bombers, things fell apart pretty quickly. The first bomber, Nikolai 𝚍𝚎𝚒, was captured even before the second bomb went off, while 𝚍𝚔𝚌𝚐, who threw the second one, he died of his injuries a few hours later. During his few moments of lucidity, he was asked what his name was, and he simply responded, and I will get someone to read this one. This is midway through on page 11.
I don't know.
Perfect.
Now, either through torture, self-preservation, or the fact that he was actually shown 𝚍𝚔𝚌𝚐's severed head in a jar, the other bomber, 𝚍𝚎𝚒, he quickly turned informant on the rest of people's will.
Well, just like plopping this dude's head in a jar on a desk. Would you lie to him? Come on.
No, what they wanted was they wanted him to identify the other plotters, because they didn't know for certain if 𝚍𝚔𝚌𝚐, like, they had witnesses and whatnot. So they cut off 𝚍𝚔𝚌𝚐's head, they put it in a jar, they brought it to 𝚍𝚎𝚒, and it's just like, yo, do you know this guy?
Anyone who has listened to our episodes is going to be losing their shit, because there's another parallel here of having a severed head in a jar. So please tell me this one is, like, preserved to the present day or something.
I don't know. I don't know if Ignaty 𝚍𝚔𝚌𝚐's head is still preserved. I hope so.
Just sitting somewhere in the Lubyanka.
Yeah. Now, 𝚍𝚎𝚒 didn't know the names of any of the leadership to betray, but he could give rough descriptions. The main organizer, Sofia Perovskaya, was the pretty blonde woman who provided the bombs, while Nikolai Kibalchich was the clever bearded fellow with a top hat.
Yes.
I would be so honored to be described as either of these things, really.
The hat is back.
And we do have the return of the shitty hat. At first, I didn't think it was a top hat. I thought it was a different hat. And I was imagining him as this clicked into my head that this story is a Team Fortress 2 story. I imagined him hiding his shitty hat under the top hat as, like, a means of disguise. But no, it turns out
the second one.
It turns out that the shitty hat was just a very shitty top hat the whole time.
Well, with the top kind of coming off.
Yeah, it's the ghastly gibbous.
TF2 in this case, like Tsar fucker 2. I was trying to think of a better word for F there, but
yeah, it's that was the operation. They undertook Operation Tsarfucker 2 and got him.
There you go. What
was TF1? There is none. It just rolls off
it was
the
the
tongue
bombs
better.
that didn't go off. It had to be canceled.
It was the guy who failed to stab the Tsar in the back.
Yeah.
He did not get the backstab. He did not have the right knife.
Guys, it would be undignified. I didn't even have the right thing on me.
The Tsar's secret police, the Okhrana, meanwhile, on top of all of their negative traits, they were effective. And with 𝚑𝚎𝚅𝚏's help, most of the People's Will leadership was captured within 2 weeks. There was one scene where, like, a hideout was located and the police attacked it. One guy shot back. He shot, like, 5 rounds and then killed himself with the 6th. And then the rest of the hideout surrendered.
The Okhrana just so mad because they killed the Tsar with a camping strategy. You were just waiting in the street.
Yeah, like, up till now, the People's Will versus Okhrana was, like, they, like, basically team deathmatch rules. They just gate off a little alleyway for a little while.
But no, then...
Sending another manifesto to the Tsar that says, it's a legitimate strategy.
But no, they just had to Tarkov rat the Tsar.
Now, Nikolai, despite everything, was actually one of the last captured. While the Okhrana was steadily winding up their operation, People's Will was still having meetings. They were printing pamphlets and they were organizing basically how best to exploit the moment while people are still looking and paying attention. I say despite everything because Nikolai was also one of the first people identified by 𝚑𝚎𝚅 the informant. They had his description, they had informants, and they had like random "have you seen this guy" signs around town.
Have you seen this hat?
And they're all looking for that guy with the shitty beard and the shitty hat. And what does Nikolai keep wearing to every single meeting? His fucking hat.
He can't stop it. He has to.
Other people at these meetings have already disguised themselves, changed their identities, changed their names and whatnot. Nikolai is still using his same cover identity, and everyone is telling him, please stop wearing that fucking hat.
I mean, Nikolai has never been one for subtlety, has he?
No.
Like, he's just kind of out there doing his thing, and you have to kind of respect it a little bit.
Amazingly, this does not get him caught, that he like keeps his very noteworthy appearance exactly the same. What got him caught, though, was being a nerd. Because despite not knowing his name, the informant 𝚑𝚎𝚅 did know that Nikolai always dressed the same and always went to a specific library to read foreign newspapers, and he went on a very strict schedule. Which, if you're a terrorist, you should probably not do anything on a strict schedule. Just saying.
Christ.
It's just like, no, I can't make it. I've got my scheduled library hour.
You don't understand. I have to be there.
On March 17th, about 2 weeks after the bombing, the Okhrana staked out the library and had another informant pick Nikolai Kibalchich out when he showed up on schedule. They basically replaced one of the windows and made it like a one-way mirror, and just had a guy standing behind it. Though instead of arresting him on the spot, they tailed him to his apartment, questioned him, and whenever they searched his apartment, not even hidden or anything, he just had a manual for bomb making and a map of targets around St. Petersburg just sitting on a table.
On brand.
So yeah.
Yeah, dipshit.
I also love the idea that they bait him by like putting out a report of some new English newspaper or something. Of just like Nikolai, you cannot go to the library. You're gonna get caught. And like,
but the New York Times has dropped
the new edition. I need to get this. So yeah, Nikolai was arrested, thrown in jail, and identified by the informant 𝚑𝚎𝚅. With no real alibi and knowing what would happen next, Nikolai agreed to write a full statement, in which he laid out his life, the reason for his actions, and his role in the People's Will. Despite this, he didn't give up any information about other cell members. His statement was basically, I did it, and here's why. He also identifies him being left in jail to rot for about 3 years as the cause of his radicalization, where before he just wanted to be like a propagandist and talk to the people. On March 22nd, Nikolai Kibalchich, along with 5 other plotters from the leadership of People's Will, they were charged with czaricide, which is actually a crime. And it's interesting that like that is a very specific kind of side.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's regicide, but you have to have it with, everything has to have Russian characteristics.
It's got to be special. Yeah.
Yeah. Was there discourse in like the following weeks over whether or not Nikolai was hot? Because he's giving a lot of Luigi right now. He's gone to kill a really important person and then did nothing to hide himself. And then when caught was like, yep, I did it. Here's my manifesto. So like, there's a lot of parallels here.
There is, except for the fact, like Nikolai is, I don't know how old Luigi is. Nikolai's 27 at this point.
I think that's very close without looking.
Except Nikolai is also continuously described, like all of his have you seen this man descriptions are like, have you seen this disgusting beard and this weird as fuck hat?
Hey guys.
So I don't think he's super hot.
How about this? They're the same age.
Yeah.
Okay. God damn it, I'm 1 year too old. Rip my chance.
I should wait.
Quinn, edit that out.
Oh no, sorry, he will wait. Yeah, he will be 27 this year.
There you go. You can
Happy
round within one.
birthday.
It's fine.
People are going to fucking celebrate Luigi's birthday, and it's going to be very interesting.
Not if you do something bigger, Quinn. You just got to get out there and do something.
But I'm
Just
too old.
Do it.
You are, yeah, like, you are never too old to blow something up.
Yeah. Don't tell me about how your joints hurt, because I know Luigi had back pain. And
Grinovitsky's joints hurting, like, immediately before they saw his head off.
well, I mean, Grinovitsky, his joints sure hurt after the bomb went off.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Now, as weird as it sounds, this is actually where we finally get to the space stuff and Nikolai's role as a rocket pioneer. At this point in the story, he is 27 and he has approximately 2 weeks left to live. Up to this point, Nikolai had other things to occupy his thoughts, basically, like his education, his work, propagandizing, or reading about bombs. But locked in prison and knowing for sure what was about to come, Nikolai was temporarily freed to work on whatever he wanted.
Now that he's back in prison, do we know what the piss jug situation is, or?
They never empty his jug at that prison.
This is the fancy prison. Yeah, they've got jugs for days. Case in point, while they were in prison, Nikolai was escorted down a hallway while another conspirator, Andrei 𝚍𝚎𝚌𝚏𝚒, was going in the opposite direction. Basically, they had a quick second to like whisper notes to each other, and while 𝚍𝚎𝚌𝚏's going like, all right, stick to the story, don't tell him anything, Nikolai whispered,
I've been working on the design of a flying machine.
and then just gone. They're off in different directions. I cannot imagine being 𝚍𝚎𝚌𝚏 at that point.
Just thinking Nikolai has lost his mind. He's gone.
All right, I'm finally, like, I have not seen these guys. I don't know what they're doing. You know, I don't know if they've turned on me. I finally see Nikolai Kibalchich, and he's just like, yo, I'm totally working on space stuff now.
That's so good. Like, I love the idea that, who's the other guy, 𝚍𝚎𝚌𝚏, like, goes back to his little, like, lunch table of people in prison, and they're like, what did he say? What did he say? And he's like, he said he's getting us out of here. Don't worry. Like,
when Nikolai's lawyer, Vladimir Gerard, came to talk to him about the case, Nikolai was disinterested. The exchange went like this.
Nikolai, it is essential that I discuss with you my design of a flying machine.
Gerard, a flying machine? I would think that my defense of your life in court would come first.
Nikolai, there is nothing you can do in this court to save my life. The only matter of curiosity about the results of my trial in this court is whether I will be hanged or shot once it is over. Since I don't have much time, therefore, my flying machine project must be my first priority. I think I have a practical idea that will benefit all of mankind. If it works, it will be my legacy to the world, and an undoubtedly positive one. I want this idea examined by qualified experts. Like, buddy, you already have a legacy to the world that is undoubtedly positive.
Yeah, I love the idea of like everybody who is in the story, in reading about this, there is no arc of like him wanting to do a flying machine and now he's finally got the time to do it. Like, he gets into prison and then suddenly his personality switches from edgelord to flying machine. And that is all he will talk about. Even in the trial, we'll get to it in a bit. He talks about this in his trial.
That is such like a hack writing move where you're like, yeah, so like just some punch up on your script here, but why is this character suddenly developing like, an entirely new interest in the third act? Like, this doesn't really can we maybe kind of tease this in the beginning or something? Like,
no. He's got a new micro fixation. What else can I say?
Well, I think that the mechanic here is that he's been caught by the police, right? Like, there's no way for him to get out of this. So he's faced directly with the prospect of his death. And so he has had to have presumably multiple mental breakdowns. And then, you know,
I don't know,
this is the only thing he can think about now is his flying machine.
In the literature, there's like he doesn't beg. Whenever he does die, he goes pretty much like he doesn't even beg for clemency or anything.
I'm not saying that
like,
you have to beg as part of having a mental breakdown. I'm just saying that like quietly locked in a cell, he's had to come to terms with the fact that he's fucked. So
yeah, and he's gonna try and do like this one last thing that he thinks is important.
I mean, look, you can still get a lot done, as he knows, with a microfixation. Like, there's no need to shame anyone over them.
2 weeks time, you can get a lot done in that time. You know, like I'm not doubting that he did some real good thinking about it. Him just like, yo, can I like skip my trial? I know what's gonna happen. Like, do I really have to sit through this? Can I just like go back to my notes? Yeah, fine, guilty, whatever.
I mean, he's already been through a trial in the justice system before. Like, he kind of knows what's up.
On the other hand, I could see him being so psyched to like, your trial will be in 1 week's time. And he's just like, what? That rules.
Yeah, he's just elated that he's like, oh my God. Like,
this is like, oh, things are finally looking up for old Nicky.
I might get through this imprisonment in one piss jug.
Now, in the trial, Gerard actually tried to use this flying machine obsession in his attempt to defend Kibalchich from the death penalty. Basically, he presented Nikolai as being so wrapped up in the mechanics of his bombs and engineering that he had no clue how they were used or on who. You know, he was just like an apolitical nerd who just liked building bombs.
Whomst among us?
How dare you call this an improvised device?
Oh, that comes whenever Nikolai... he gets very offended at certain points. Also, whenever the prosecutor then questioned Nikolai about like, hey, did you know what you were doing? Or were you just, you know, a guy making bombs? He was like, no, I knew exactly what I was doing, as his lawyer is like eating his notes.
Making the most furious shut the fuck up gesture in history.
And Nikolai sees it and just waves back cheerily.
I mean, I'm really with Nikolai here. Like, it is going to be a show trial. Like, there's no way that he's going to get off on any of this, I would think. I mean, I'm not a 19th century Russian law expert, but I feel like he kind of... He knows what's up. Like, yeah, you might as well just use the trial to get your licks in for whatever you want to get heated about.
Oh, and that does happen, because the rest of the trial was a shit show, with every one of the 6 accused acting according to their characters. Also, for what it's worth, Rysakov, the informant, was on that trial, so womp womp. The ringleader, 𝚍𝚘𝚅, he actually earned a lot of like sympathetic media attention because he went on these long, impassioned speeches about the righteousness of their cause. Nikolai, meanwhile, got superheated over minor technical details, also according to his character. When prosecutors accused the attack of deliberately harming civilians, Nikolai went on a very long rant about how his bombs were designed to be as concentrated as possible. When witnesses argued that the bombs were imported and it was like the result of foreign intelligence and whatnot, Nikolai then stood up and spoke at length about how he had designed and built them, and he even gave citations to the Russian artillery journal, issue August 1878. I think we talked about this last time a bit, like whenever confronted about like how did you get these bombs, he has an MLA citation ready to go.
See, I know that these notes in the script are maybe not for reading out loud, but you've called him a dweeb here.
I do.
And I would like to point out that you just referenced a specific issue of a Team Fortress like comic book.
Oh, I'm not saying I'm not
recognize
I should have added something there. The reason I was calling him a dweeb, like I'm a nerd. He's a dweeb. He's a dweeb because he's putting a fucking MLA, like I'm being sentenced to death, and it's like, actually, Russian Artillery Journal, issue August 1878. That's where I got the bombs.
These are homegrown. How dare you accuse me?
Oh yeah, he is offended by the idea that someone else made his bombs.
That's really good. I mean, again, if you are on death row, you might as well go out with integrity. Like, you look at the legacy of some of the other people involved, everyone's turning, everyone's going like flipping and going informant, and he's like, no, we are going to be precise about this. Like, I built this and this is how I learned. Fuck you. I love it.
My favorite part, though, was when Nikolai gave his final statement before sentencing. Quote, "There now comes the question of how to prevent the repetition of regrettable events such as the ones which we are here concerned. The prosecutor appears to believe that the one sure method is to make sure no move towards conciliation and to rely entirely upon the gallows and the firing squad. I regret that I cannot agree with the prosecutor that the methods he suggests will lead to the end desired. There is one thing more. I have drafted a project for a flying machine."
Yeah.
Just, guys, listen. You know I'm guilty. I know I'm guilty. I'm going to be taking I'm taking a short drop soon, but hear me out. What if we can fly?
I don't have the full statement, but I imagine that first paragraph was like the first 30 seconds, and then the rest of his 3-hour statement is just him like, all right, now this is where the rocket is going to go. I've put a lot of thought into this.
I really love the idea. Like, we get one example of him doing this, but I want to believe that he's like Cato the Elder, and he is just ending every single one of his statements with, I have, like, furthermore, I have drafted a project for a flying machine.
He really wants you to follow up on that line of dialogue.
He wants to engage you on his special interest.
You haven't responded to him by picking the dialogue option that responds to his statement about the flying machine.
That is the only option that progresses his dialogue tree. He's just sitting there like, I said I've drafted a project for a flying machine.
Why don't you want to hear about it?
And his lawyer is just like, I'm trying to save your life.
You get two options for responding to him. You get the rude option, which gives you the rude points, and then you have the polite option asked with the flying machine, which gives you the polite points. So,
but the polite option does lock you into a 2-hour unskippable cutscene.
Well, I mean, you know what? It's the 19th century. Like, it was not a thing to skip cutscenes yet. You can't judge things by the standards of today.
Now, I should probably explain what this flying machine actually was. Because of the situation, the notes are rough and incomplete. A fair chunk of them were actually written and sketched by Nikolai's lawyer Gerard from memory. But basically what he laid out was a large wooden platform with a rocket mounted in the middle. If you've ever seen a drawing of the Montgolfier balloon, imagine that, but we'll replace the balloon with a hot water heater. You know, it's basically just like a small wooden deck and then a hot water heater in the middle, like a big cylinder.
This wax of the, Chinese rocket chair, just a bit.
It is... what's his name? I'm blanking on the guy's name who probably
the
didn't
lawn
actually.
Chair guy.
The see you later peasants lights 40 rockets, disappears in a puff of smoke.
And everyone's just like, well, he must have flown.
Larry Walters, there you go.
I want to be clear that if anyone did
noted Chinese rocket scientist Mr. Walters.
I want to be clear, if anyone did actually try and ride this thing, they would almost certainly die. But it is important, and Nikolai ranks among rocket visionaries because he even had the thought to think of this and put it on paper.
Can we see a picture of this, or will it show up if I look it up?
If you look up Kibalchich rocket, you will see it.
I feel like Kibalchich really has his priorities in the wrong order. Like, you should have invented the flying machine before the bombs, and then you could have
dropped them out of the flying machine,
right? Or at least flown away from the Ukran on this, something.
Just roast the Tsar with the exhaust, and this is cursed.
That's the most peasant brain rocket design I've ever seen in my entire life.
Why would you need to sit? You're going on a trip. You need to get ready to get off it.
So this is not necessarily a good design, but he's still he was one of the first, and he was one of the first to think of, and pretty much the first to actually design a solid fuel manned rocket. There had been a couple of kind of theorists through the 1800s, but he actually sits down and he engineers something that he thinks could work.
In his mind, are you going just really high just for the hell of it, or you're going
long
across a distance of somewhere, or are you actually going into what you conceive of as outer space?
So for him, this was a means of aerial transport. This was a plane. You would fly this to another city.
Okay.
How you land, I don't know.
This will make sense to anyone listening, but this is a lot like forward sizzle to Ken Carter's design, where he's just it's a rocket that will get me there. How are you going to land? Oh, I don't know. We plant some rose bushes.
Yeah. We'll think about it when we get there.
So this big cylindrical rocket would be loaded with slow-burning gunpowder that would propel the craft into the sky and maybe beyond. His notes also mention a couple of ideas and iterations, like having multiple stages or even multiple ways of steering the craft. Like he proposed using fins in the air, you could use weights, you could use tiny rockets. These are all things that are now used today and are kind of cornerstones of rocketry.
He even proposed thrust vectoring.
Yeah. Nikolai also wasn't trying to buy his life with this design. He knew he was going to die for Tsaricide and only wanted his design passed along to experts who could work with it. While a few officials, especially the military, were somewhat interested in his notes, there was no way that the new Tsar's government would approve work on an assassin's brainchild project. Nikolai was allowed to send his files along to the government, but they were then left in a police archive, completely unread until 1918. At the trial in late March, Nikolai Kibalchich and the other 5 assassins, including the informant Rysakov, were sentenced to death by hanging for the crime of Tsaricide. During a brief appeals process, some of the plotters tried to convince the Tsar to spare them. One, Gessia Gelfman, was spared because she was pregnant, though she would later die in prison almost a year later of illness. Nikolai, meanwhile, did not beg for mercy, but instead sent the Tsar several letters suggesting policy changes that would help prevent future violence. Just some nice pointers. And for once, he did not talk about the flying machine.
I guess 𝚍𝚎𝚜 is a good example of, this is another one in the cons column for the 19th century. I feel like you do a lot of dying in prison from illness back then.
Oh, yeah. And the child also died, unfortunately.
Aww.
Now, on April 3rd, 1882, just over a month after they'd assassinated the Emperor of Russia, Tsar Alexander II, Nikolai Kibalchich and 4 of his fellow conspirators were led to the gallows in front of a crowd of thousands. Even without his hat, Nikolai donned the spiritual fedora to the end, refusing communion and turning down the offer to kiss the cross. He was also the first to hang. Quote, "He appeared calm and unafraid. The hood was rearranged and the noose pulled tightly around his neck. Frolov then kicked the stool out from under him, and Kibalchich was hanging. He apparently died very quickly without agitation."
You mentioned the spiritual fedora, but I like to imagine he's still wearing the literal top hat, and it only comes off his head.
The hood is just really weird and lumpy looking.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the hood. Maybe they put the top hat over the hood, but then it finally falls off when he drops.
No,
I think for this to work, the hood has to not be there. So
I like the idea of just a super tall hood. Just very cylindrical.
Nikolai's legacy.
Now, it is an unfortunate reality that Nikolai Kibalchich has and likely will go down in history mostly for his role in assassinating Tsar Alexander II instead of his space travel ideas. A lot of this has to do with nothing technically coming out of those ideas until decades later. The actual drawings and documents were filed away in a police report somewhere and lost until well into the Soviet period. Even then, no one ever built Kibalchich's rocket. No one ever rode the gunpowder rocket deck. Anyone who tried would almost definitely have been killed.
Would have been cool, though.
Killed by who, though?
But Kibalchich, with his explosives experience, was one of the first to envision a solid fuel manned rocket. His designs also called for multiple stages and different fuels to be used at different altitudes, correctly figuring that dropping spent stages would let the rocket fly further and faster. So, these are good ideas. These are things that have later been adopted. And even if his work wasn't necessarily, if other people came up with those ideas themselves while his work was still uncovered, he was still one of the first to really theorize this and actually put it down in engineering drawings. Also noteworthy for the fact that this was all done in 2 weeks immediately prior to his death via hanging.
Yeah, he finally had some good time for introspection.
Listen, whenever you're in the zone, you have to work on your projects, you can't waste it. When the documents were found and spread, they did have an impact on the works of later rocket visionaries like Konstantin Tsiolkovsky and Hermann Oberth, who developed his ideas into more practical concepts. It's difficult to know how much of this is propaganda and how much is genuine. The Soviets did rehabilitate Kibalchich both as a socialist revolutionary hero and as a rocket genius, even claiming that Sergei Korolev was working off of his own designs when he designed the first satellite launcher, which is almost certainly not true. In his congratulations speech after the launch of Yuri Gagarin, Nikita Khrushchev said,
"Now, as we stand alongside the man who completed the first journey into the cosmos, we can't help recalling the name of that Russian scientist revolutionary, Kibalchich, who dreamed of rocket flight into space, and whom the Tsarist government executed."
Which is a pretty simplistic way of looking at the story. Also nice voice, by the way.
That's exactly what Khrushchev sounded like, right? It's exactly like that.
I think so. Perfect.
Just like that. So when he said
in English,
yeah, and so when he would go to Korolev and he'd be like, "Wouldn't it be nice to have something for the holidays?"
For the holidays. It is also worth mentioning that in post-Soviet Russia, Kibalchich is back to being a villain.
Yeah, I wonder fucking why, dude.
Womp womp. Guy who stood against expansionist policies and empire. Whoa.
I wonder how many times this dude will be rehabilitated and then debilitated.
Debilitated?
Yeah.
We're doing our part. Actually, I don't know if we're rehabilitating him because I guess this leads into the next thing. That, everyone, is the story of Nikolai Ivanovich Kibalchich, the rocket visionary who blew up a Tsar. Have we rehabilitated him? Have we dehabilitated him? What does everybody think about this fucking dude?
I mean, I think the fact that you said it's unfortunate that he'll most likely be remembered for his role in assassinating the Tsar, is it unfortunate?
Maybe not. I'd say just as a space dude, I would much rather have him remembered for his space stuff. But then I recognize that I'm biased. His space stuff was 2 weeks out of his life, and his assassinating the Tsar stuff was several years.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, I guess what would those 2 weeks have been in a different situation? It's like that. I've been trying to remember this quote. I think it's a Stephen Jay Gould quote where he's talking about like I'm less interested in dissecting like the genius of Einstein than I am about like the people who are like potentially the best in their field that are like living in poverty in an undeveloped country, right? Or like people who like are never given that chance. And
the opportunity to prove themselves.
Yeah, it's like, what if the greatest rocket engineer, designer of all time was trapped in, the 19th century killing czars?
Yeah, like what could he have done in the 60s or the 70s or today? Mm-hmm. Who could he have blown up?
It was actually a very shrewd move on his part to throw in that, like, the constant mention of, by the way, I have a flying machine, because that enabled this podcast episode to be made out of him. Because I feel like without that, it would have been like harder to draw some of these connections to justify talking about the bomb thrower on the space podcast.
I keep coming back to it, but yeah, like him.
His lawyer is just, he wanted to just tell him to shut the fuck up constantly the entire trial, it sounds like.
Although, like, he never would have saved him, and the whole thing of, like, no, he was just an apolitical dude who liked building gadgets, that was, like, a huge lie. Kibalchich was a radical for a fairly huge chunk of his life.
My client is an apolitical dork who loves building gadgets, wink lie.
And then Nikolai stands up and says, like, nope, I knew exactly what. I do like building bombs, not gonna lie there.
See, this is the real George Washington chopping down a cherry tree. He's in court. He's like, I cannot tell a lie. I did it. Like, this is your honesty hero.
Yeah, and if you're the prosecutor, you can bait him. You can say, like, man, I bet these were foreign bombs, which immediately sends him off on a rant. The downside is that rant will immediately turn into talking about his flying machine.
You just have to take the hit.
God, this is how the Okhrana tortured him. They were just like, oh, I bet you your flying machine wouldn't even work. And he's like, no.
This is how you get the MAGA bomber to confess when he eventually happens.
I bet the Iranians gave you that bomb.
I bet these were foreign Iranian bombs.
No,
they were made in my garage.
I mean, that dude did build a shit bomb. I put it to you that Kibalchich would have fucking obliterated a Cybertruck if you gave him the chance.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
that's a Tsarist coded vehicle I've ever seen one.
No, that is how you go back in time and do this. You just put a Cybertruck at the other end of the street and just plant the pedal.
Imagining that the Tsar's armored carriage was just like very blocky and chrome. But yeah, everybody, that has been part 2, and with that, the end of our series on Nikolai Ivanovich Kibalchich.
That was so good. I wish they could have gone on forever. I love stories like this.
I still love how one of the best reasons, or one of the reasons he got caught, was he just could not separate himself from the library.
I'm slightly disappointed because in my head, this went a little differently. Here I was thinking that it was going to be an anecdote of how, like, the Tsar sat down for dinner again, and then, like, his chair exploded in a column of flame that shot his remains up into the stratosphere. Like,
he got
you thought we were going to get like a Spanish space program kind of thing, yeah?
Yeah, but, I mean,
No, we got
In fairness, the first grenade did raise his carriage, like, I don't know, like a couple of inches off the ground.
And one more thing, we did get the action movie catchphrase.
Oh, God, don't thank God yet. Or doing the best part is that 𝚍𝚎𝚏, the guy who delivers the line, immediately turns informant.
Yeah, he had his fun.
And the guy who is the recipient of the action hero line, Grevonitsky, he proceeds to, Grinovitsky, he proceeds to immediately fumble his grenade onto his own shoe, and then it detonates. Whoops. I'm sure 𝚍𝚎𝚏 saw that and was just like, oh, okay, well, I guess the Tsar's dead at least. Choosing to imagine that Grinovitsky's head wasn't cut off after he died, it just kind of like popped into the air like a champagne cork when the grenade went off and just landed in front of 𝚍𝚎𝚏.
Getting 𝚍𝚎𝚏 to talk by he's sleeping in his jail cell, and then the guards come in with the head, and they throw it in his lap, like in with the horse head in Godfather.
Oh, yeah. 𝚍𝚎𝚏, we're gonna get you out. You just have to tell us who all of our names, your fellow conspirators are, and they've just got like Grinovitsky's head on a string right by the window, kind of like hovering. 𝚍𝚎𝚏, I'm here to haunt you.
Beautiful.
The severed head whispering to him like, God, Warhammer reference, Queek Head Taker. And
I thought you were going to go with, all right, I'm going to show my nerd card now. I thought you were going to say with Vulcan being haunted by Ferrus Manus's head.
No, but it's roughly the same.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we all got to make an embarrassing reference today, and I think that's beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
It's never embarrassing to reference Rat. What do you mean?
I do think also, sincerely, that it's fun to talk about. Like, I think that Narodnya Volia should get talked about more. Like, they don't get credit in the Tsar killing game. Like, all people talk about is like the overthrow of Nicholas and like the killing of him and his family by the Bolsheviks. But like, these people went out and they killed the sitting Tsar like decades before that. Not
during
like,
a civil war. Like, it's one thing to kill a guy after you have already beaten him in a civil war. It is another thing to assassinate a guy while his government is still at full power and you are 20-somethings with like one shitty hat between you.
Yeah, your entire support network is those 20-somethings with one hat between you.
Yeah, is the guy who runs into you in the prison and is just like, okay, yeah, I know we're going to die. By the way, you want to see some cool notes?
They had to share custody of the hat.
But yeah, that has been a series. Kelly, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything you would like to plug to our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, if people enjoyed my presence here these last couple episodes, then, well, I mean, I hope you enjoyed it because I'll never be allowed back on again after my antics. But
one and done.
But there are places you can find me online. So my podcast is called Canuck Is A Slur. It is a look into what I'm calling highly specific episodes of Canadian history or culture.
Canadiana.
Yeah, I don't know. That word just makes me feel sticky, but...
Oh, yeah.
But it's I mean, it's not so firmly limited to, hey, like, only people who grew up in Canada will remember this. For example, I'm going to encourage people to go check out our William King Thomas episodes, because a lot of that just takes place like during the U.S. Civil War and in Germany. But it's very much this energy. I just love a good obscure story. So that's kind of what it is a collection of obscure stories. And you can look forward to Quinn coming back on in the next few weeks, because we have the just incredible story of a man trying to jump a rocket-powered car over the St. Lawrence Seaway.
And this is separate from whenever we, FTL, covered another guy trying to jump over a canyon in a rocket car. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
But highly related stories again.
Why didn't it work? He should have gotten Truax on board.
Yeah, so you can find it. It's under Canuck Is A Slur. It's on YouTube. It's on your podcast apps. It is everywhere. We do have like some visuals in the video version if you're into that. But I try to make it as good for the audio listeners as possible. And and we have a Patreon. I have stopped working all of my shitty jobs that I hate, and I only have this going right now. So if you want to help me make the jump into being able to do this show every week, then like I said, pull your money out of the FTL Patreon and put it into mine. And if you don't like my work, then hey, you know what? You can just pull your money.
You can pay him to make it better.
You can take your money out of the FTL Patreon and just like go buy some drugs or something, you know? Like there's a lot of things you can do. You could go buy some cheese. That would be thematic.
Oh, you can buy a little Napoleonic action figure and then dip it in fondue and pretend that is what happened to Tsar Alexander II.
Or you can buy a copy of that really random Russian artillery journal.
I thought you were going to say the other thing that the Okhrana invented, which is the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which like 90% of modern anti-Semitism has come from. So thanking Tsar Alexander 2 and 3 for that one.
And I know that was a long plug, but there is one thing more. I have drafted a project for a flying machine.
Thank you to everyone who have signed up to support the show. And a big shout out to all of our top tier patrons. Our sideboard cats are August Sun, Boss, Charlie, Daniel F, Jorg 2, Hippity Hoppity, This Asteroid Is Now My Property, Lane of the Wired, Luke Newcomb, Lupe G, Matt, Mobius Striptease, Nerdbeast, Noah, Oil Drum, Pat, Space Northpaw, Spectre Cohen, Tactical Sport, Tortilla Baron, and Vivek D. Our space dogs are A Union Thug, Adam H, Angry Old Man, Yada Yada, Anthony C, Otto Fox, Band User, Baron M, Ben L, Boomzilla, Brent D, Cantaloupe Was Taken, Chainsaw Snuggling, Charles G, Cole C, Captain Lag, CSD 2016, Daddy Bongo,
Double Time, Dr. Shockmaster, Hank, Aaron, Fractal Moonlight, Furious Luddite, Ian W., Emmanuel L., JM M., James A., James C., Jamie K., John C., John Tastic 20x6, Kara Chameleon, Kate D., Corbin the Dog, Korolev's Condiments, Lenswipe, M., McLean C., Mar, Norman W., Panda, Randall, Sam A., Sean F., Sean H., Sensual Kazoo, Sean P., Sophie L., Sparks, Spirit of Thunder, That Big Sexy, The Best Sean, Tom M., Tim P., Trash Do, Viraj T., Risk, Will W., Wingsmith, Zap, and Zim.
Albert Count, 102.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Failure to Launch. If you want to follow us, we are Failure to Launch on Blue Sky and FT Launch Pod on Instagram. We also post our episodes with visual aids at Failure to Launch Podcast on YouTube. FTL intro and outro themes were provided by DJ Danarchy.